coming out of the state of Montana. I want to put up this tweet here. This from Tom Bridge there with a photo. Scenes from the Montana House where Zoe Behold, State Representative Zooey Zephyr, was just banned from the House of Representatives. So let's get an update on one of these really biggest news stories of the day. Today you watched, we took it live, Montana state lawmakers voting to censure Representative Zooey Zephyr for the rest of the 2023 season. These were some of the protests on the floor a couple of days ago there in Helena. For more on this story, we're joined by Tom Kuglin from the Helena Independent Record. Tom joins us now. Tom, thanks so much. Good to see you. We appreciate your reporting into this. Tell us more about what happened today and how did we get here, especially? This was a long time coming, and now it seems like it is over.
It is over in a couple different ways. The House did censure the Representative Zephyr, as you said, and also our session's actually going to end in about a week. We think we only meet for 90 days every 2 years, so we do have a deadline coming up at the end, and we're almost there. So last week, Representative Zephyr rose on a bill. It was dealing with basically medical care for transgender minors. She had some pretty pointed words. She said that Republicans should be ashamed for voting for the bill and that they would have blood on their hands. She was referencing some words we've gotten here from people around the state that parents of transgender youth who have seen their young loved ones attempt suicide, and she was speaking to that, but that led to House Speaker Matt Regier declining to recognize her. That lasted about 3 or 4 days. She would attempt to buzz in to speak on bills, and Democrats would object. It would go to the board, and Republicans would choose to uphold that. There were a few Republicans who decided not to, but they changed their minds after what happened on Monday. So I was on the House floor on Monday. We knew this large protest was going on outside. We went out and covered that. We came back. They filled the gallery, and that's when we saw some kind of shuffling of the bills. So some of the bills that we would expect Zephyr to speak on moved down the board. That led to a kind of long leg period. And then when she did buzz in to speak on a bill that was dealing with parental rights in public schools, she was denied the right to speak. It went to the board again. And that's when really the crowd erupted, and you're seeing what happened after that.
So, Tom, you mentioned, though, that the legislative session is almost over. So what was done today on the House floor is essentially stripping her ability to speak at all for the rest of the legislative session. That's not, I guess, happening in the long term, if you will, because it is wrapping up soon, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There's some unanswered questions here. What's going to happen with committees, because she is on committees.
Okay.
The committees are getting close to being done. We also have interim committees that meet between sessions. We don't know how that's going to affect that. She did say today that she does plan to run again. And Representative Zephyr comes from a very heavily Democratic area in the state, in Missoula, which is a college town. And I think she won with about 70-some-odd% of the vote. So, unless there's something unexpected, we'd probably expect to see her back in 2 years.
What does this say, though, Tom, about the state, I guess, of transgender rights, the ongoing debate in Montana there specifically? I mean, obviously she is an outlier. She is fighting against the Republican-controlled majority. They have spoken, stripping her right to speak there. Is there more appetite, though, for these pieces of legislation restricting some of these transgender rights there in the state? Are we going to see even more of that after this, or is it going to temper?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure. We certainly don't have time for it right now, just given the end of the session is next week. But Representative Zephyr is the first transgender woman to be elected to our state house. So while 2 years ago we saw, I would say, some of the first bills dealing with transgender issues, this is the first time we've had a representative that directly was speaking, from her personal experience and observation. That certainly didn't necessarily mesh with what a lot of the Republicans were doing, bringing these bills and voting for these bills. So I'm not sure if the temperature has been turned down or turned up. There's some moves going forward, such as like the galleries for the House that we used to allow the public in have been closed moving forward. So, the opportunity maybe to disrupt the House floor again may not be there for the next 7 days, but I wouldn't be surprised if we did see, additional protests or demonstrations in the coming days. Today's protest was quite a bit smaller than the one we saw on Monday before the House was disrupted for about an hour, then came back and finished their business for the day.
Okay. And Tom, just lastly, what about from Zephyr's perspective? We have reached out to her office here on Live Now from Fox. What has she said in the wake of all of this? Is she emboldened? Is she apologetic at all for those remarks that, her Republican colleagues would essentially have blood on their hands if these bills were passed? Does she regret that? Have you spoken with her?
She did have a media availability right after the vote. She said she expected the vote to go down as it did, that basically the Republicans wouldn't have brought the motion if they thought they weren't going to be successful. There was 3 Republicans that basically voted against the speaker's motion earlier in the week that then flipped to give them the 2/3 needed to make the vote today. 2 of those Republicans actually spoke in favor of the bill on the floor. Zephyr, she's defiant in this. She says, she was speaking for her perspective, and that, part of this is that not only has she been silenced, but now her 11,000 odd constituents also don't have sort of that voice and have been disenfranchised as well. So we certainly didn't hear any sort of contrition or anything like that or regret. She says she's standing up for democracy and her values in her community, and she's sticking by that.
All right. Tom Kuglin with the Helena Independent Record. We appreciate your time. I know you got to go, and we'll talk again. Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, Andrew.